He had nothing but a worn-out sedan, a security guard uniform that barely paid the bills, and a 10-year-old son who still believed his father could fix anything. She had no phone, no money, and nowhere to turn when 3 men cornered her in the parking garage. When Harry Walker saw what was happening during his night shift at Millbrook's upscale shopping center, he didn't think twice about abandoning his post to help a terrified stranger. But what he didn't know was that those 30 seconds of courage would cost him the only job keeping him and his son afloat. And what he couldn't have imagined was who Olivia Smith really was, or that within 48 hours, she would hand him an envelope containing something that would leave him speechless and change their lives in ways he never thought possible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through the silence of the small apartment at 6:47 p.m., 3 minutes before Harry Walker needed to leave for another night shift at Millbrook Shopping Center. He'd learned to set it early, not because he was a slow starter, but because these few minutes were the only time he had to just breathe before facing another 12 hours of walking empty corridors and watching surveillance monitors that showed him a world he couldn't afford to be part of. Harry sat on the edge of his bed, running his hands through hair that had started showing gray threads at 32 too early, but stress had a way of leaving its mark. The apartment was quiet except for the soft sound of pencil scratching against paper from the living room, where his son Jamie worked on homework at their second-hand kitchen table. The boy, brilliant, curious, and still young enough to believe that tomorrow held infinite possibilities, never complained about their circumstances. But Harry saw the way Jamie's eyes lingered on storefronts when they walked through the shopping district, the careful way he never asked for anything that cost more than a few dollars. The apartment they shared was clean but worn, furnished with pieces Harry had collected from garage sales and discount stores over the past 3 years since Jamie's mother had died in the car accident. Everything had a story of thrift and necessity. The couch with the small tear they'd covered with duct tape that Jamie had decorated with marker drawings, the television that only worked if you hit it just right on the left side, the refrigerator that hummed too loudly but kept their food cold. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and Harry had fought to keep it that way. The security guard uniform hung on the closet door, navy blue polyester that never quite fit right, with Millbrook security embroidered in gold thread that had started to fray around the edges. Harry had worn this uniform for 18 months now, ever since the factory where he'd worked for 6 years had closed down and moved operations overseas. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, utilities, groceries, and Jamie's school supplies, with nothing left over for emergencies or dreams. But it was honest work, and in a job market that seemed to have forgotten about men like Harry, men with high school educations and strong backs but no college degrees, honest work was increasingly hard to find. "Dad?" Jamie's voice carried from the living room, pulling Harry from his thoughts. "Yeah, buddy? Can you check my math homework before you go? I think I got the fractions right, but Mrs. Patterson said we need to show all our work." Harry smiled despite the weight pressing on his shoulders. Jamie was 10 years old, bright as a new penny, and had inherited his mother's gift for numbers. The boy consistently brought home A's in mathematics, often helping classmates who struggled with concepts that seemed to come naturally to him. Harry had dreams of Jamie going to college someday, dreams that felt both essential and impossible when he looked at their bank account balance. "Of course. Let me see what you've got." Harry walked into the living room where Jamie sat surrounded by textbooks and worksheets. The boy had organized everything with the precision of someone twice his age, pencils lined up by length, erasers positioned just so, his notebook open to a page covered in neat handwriting and carefully worked problems. It was a quality Harry admired and worried about in equal measure. Jamie shouldn't have to be so organized, so careful. So aware of the importance of getting everything right the first time, because there wasn't money for mistakes. "These look perfect," Harry said, reviewing. "The homework. You've got every step shown clearly. Mrs. Patterson is going to be impressed." Jamie beamed with pride, but then his expression grew more serious. "Dad, Kyle Morrison brought his new gaming system to school today. It was really cool, but ... He trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging between them. Harry knew what his son wasn't saying. Kyle Morrison's father owned 3 restaurants in the city. Kyle Morrison had things that Jamie could only look at and wonder about. But Jamie had learned not to ask, had learned to appreciate what they had instead of wanting what they couldn't afford. "But you've got something Kyle Morrison doesn't have," Harry said, sitting down beside his son. "What's that?" "You've got a brain that can solve any problem you put in front of it. And you've got determination. Those things are worth more than any gaming system," Jamie nodded thoughtfully. "Plus, I've got you." The simple statement hit Harry like a physical blow, not painful, but overwhelming in its trust and love. This boy depended on him completely, believed in him absolutely, and saw him as a hero despite their humble circumstances. It was a responsibility that kept Harry awake some nights and motivated him through the long hours of walking empty hallways and checking locked doors. "Yes, you do," Harry said, his voice thick with emotion. "Always." As Harry prepared to leave for work, he went through their evening routine, checking that Jamie had dinner, leftover spaghetti from the night before, making sure the boy had his inhaler nearby, a mild asthma condition that required the occasional puff but wasn't serious, and confirming that Mrs. Chun next door was available if any emergency arose. Mrs. Chun was a widow in her 70s, who had taken a motherly interest in Jamie and often watched him during Harry's night shifts. She refused to accept payment, claiming that the boy's company was worth more than money. "I'll be back when you wake up for school," Harry said, kissing the top of Jamie's head. "Finish your homework, brush your teeth, and don't stay up past 9 watching those nature documentaries." "I won't," Jamie promised, though they both knew he probably would. The boy had developed a fascination with marine biology and spent hours watching programs about ocean life, dreaming of someday swimming with dolphins or studying coral reefs. Harry grabbed his keys, wallet, and the thermos of coffee he'd prepared, a necessary fuel for staying alert during the quiet hours when the shopping center emptied of customers and filled with shadows. The drive to Millbrook took 25 minutes through neighborhoods that grew progressively more affluent, from the modest apartment complexes and small houses of Harry's area to the manicured lawns and luxury cars of the shopping district. Millbrook. Shopping center was the kind of place Harry had rarely visited before taking this job, an upscale collection of boutiques, restaurants, and specialty stores catering to customers who thought nothing of spending Harry's weekly salary on a handbag or dinner. The parking garage alone was nicer than most buildings in Harry's neighborhood, with smooth concrete floors, bright LED lighting, and security cameras positioned at every corner dot. As Harry parked his sedan, a 12-year-old Honda with 180,000 miles and a persistent rattle that he couldn't afford to fix next to a row of BMWs and Mercedes, he felt the familiar mix of gratitude and inadequacy that came with working in a world where he didn't belong. He was grateful for the job, grateful for the steady paycheck, but constantly aware of the gulf between his life and the lives of the people he protected. The security office was located on the ground level of the parking garage, a small room filled with monitors showing feeds from dozens of cameras throughout the shopping center. Harry's supervisor, Rick Martinez, was finishing up the day shift paperwork when Harry arrived. "Evening, Harry. Quiet day today, just the usual shoplifting attempt at the electronics store and a fender bender in the east lot. Nothing major." Harry nodded, settling into the chair that would be his command post for the next 12 hours. The job was mostly routine, monitoring the cameras, doing hourly walking patrols through the shopping center and parking areas, and responding to the occasional call for assistance. It wasn't exciting work, but it was important, keeping people safe, protecting property, making sure that families could shop and dine without worry. As Rick gathered his things and prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Harry, corporate's been asking questions about overtime costs again. I know you could use the extra hours, but try to keep everything by the book, you know. No unnecessary reports, no complications." Harry understood. The security company that contracted with Millbrook was always looking for ways to cut costs. And guards who caused problems, even for good reasons, were easily replaced. "No complications," Harry agreed. Alone in the security office, Harry began his shift by checking each camera feed, noting the areas where late shoppers were still browsing, watching for anything unusual or concerning. The monitors showed him glimpses of a world he could observe, but not truly participate in. Couples enjoying expensive dinners, families buying clothes that cost more than Harry made in a week, teenagers with credit cards that had no limits. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, but Harry didn't feel bitter about it. He'd learned that happiness wasn't about having the most or the best. It was about protecting what mattered, taking care of the people you loved, and doing your job with integrity, even when no one was watching. Jamie was fed, healthy, and excelling in school. They had a roof over their heads and food on the table. It wasn't everything Harry had once dreamed of, but it was enough. As the shopping center began to empty and the night settled in around him, Harry walked his first patrol of the evening, his footsteps echoing through corridors that would soon be silent except for the soft hum of security systems and the distant sound of traffic. He didn't know that in a few hours, everything would change. He didn't know that his simple commitment to doing what was right would cost him everything he'd worked to build. And he couldn't have imagined that losing everything would be the first step toward finding something better than he'd ever dared to hope for. For now, he was just a man with a job to do, walking through the quiet spaces between other people's dreams, keeping watch through another night so that tomorrow could arrive safely for everyone. Under his protection. It was 11:47 p.m. when Harry first noticed her on camera 7, the feed that covered the northeast corner of the parking garages. Second level. She appeared suddenly in the frame, moving quickly but not quite running, her head turning to look over her shoulder every few steps. Even through the grainy black and white security footage, Harry could see the tension in her posture, the way she clutched what appeared to be a small purse against her chest like a shield. Olivia Smith, though Harry didn't know her name yet, was not dressed for the kind of evening shopping that Millbrook typically saw during late hours. While the usual after-dinner crowd wore designer clothes and carried shopping bags from expensive boutiques, she wore dark jeans and a simple jacket that looked like it had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she moved with the quick, efficient steps of someone who was used to walking places rather than driving luxury cars. Harry leaned forward in his chair, adjusting the camera angle to get a better view. Something about her movement pattern bothered him, the way she kept checking behind her, the urgency in her steps that didn't match the casual pace of typical late-evening shoppers. In his 18 months of monitoring these cameras, Harry had developed an instinct for reading body language through the security feeds. This woman wasn't shopping. She was running from something or someone. The realization hit him just as 3 figures appeared at the edge of camera 7's range. 3 men, moving with purpose, their heads scanning the parking garage systematically. They weren't walking like shoppers either. They moved like hunters tracking prey, spreading out slightly to cover more ground while maintaining communication through gestures and quick exchanges. Harry's pulse quickened. He'd seen situations like this before, though usually in the rougher neighborhoods where he'd grown up, not in the sanitized safety of Millbrook's upscale shopping environment. The men were clearly pursuing the woman, and from their coordinated movement, this wasn't a coincidence or a chance encounter. He reached for his radio to call the police, then hesitated. What could he tell them? 3 men walking through a parking garage wasn't a crime. A woman walking quickly wasn't evidence of anything wrong. He had suspicions, instincts, but no concrete proof that anything illegal was happening. The police would ask questions he couldn't answer, want details he didn't have. On camera 7, the woman had reached the far end of the parking level, where a concrete pillar provided temporary concealment. She pressed herself against it, clearly trying to decide which direction to go. The parking garage had only 2 exits from that level. The stairwell she'd come from, which would take her back toward the men pursuing her, or the elevator bank, which would leave her trapped if they caught up while she waited. Harry switched to camera 9, which covered the elevator area, then back to camera 7. The 3 men had split up now, moving more aggressively. One headed toward the stairwell to cut off her retreat, while the other 2 advanced from different angles. Professional, coordinated. This wasn't random. The woman must have realized her situation was deteriorating. Harry watched as she made a desperate decision, breaking from her hiding spot and running toward the elevator bank. Her purse bounced against her hip as she ran, and Harry could see her fumbling for something, a phone, keys, anything that might help, but the men were faster and had anticipated her move. Harry's radio crackled with a routine check-in from the shopping center's front desk security. "Walker, this is Central. Status report on your 11:45 patrol." Harry stared at the monitors, watching as the 3 men converged on the woman near the elevators. She was trapped now, her back against the wall, facing 3 men who clearly meant her harm. This was the moment, the decision point that would define what kind of man Harry Walker really was. "Walker, do you copy?" The protocol was clear. Harry's job was to monitor the cameras and alert the appropriate authorities if he observed criminal activity. He was specifically instructed never to leave his post during a shift, except for scheduled patrols. Abandoning the security station to intervene personally was grounds for immediate termination, and with his employment record, a factory closure, and 18 months of night security work, finding another job would be nearly impossible. Jamie's face flashed through his mind. His son, asleep in their small apartment, trusting that his father would come home in the morning with another day's pay earned honestly. Harry thought about their conversation earlier, about Kyle Morrison's gaming system and the careful way Jamie never asked for things they couldn't afford. This job was all that stood between them and eviction, between stability and the kind of desperate poverty Harry had fought so hard to escape. On camera 7, one of the men had grabbed the woman's arm. She was struggling, trying to pull away, but she was clearly outmatched. Harry could see her mouth moving. She was screaming, but the camera feeds had no audio, and the security office was 2 levels below and insulated from outside sounds. "Central, this is Walker," Harry said into his radio, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I need to investigate a possible situation in parking level 2. We'll be away from my station for approximately 10 minutes. Walker, you're not scheduled for patrol until midnight. Return to monitoring position." Harry was already standing, clipping the radio to his belt and grabbing his flashlight. Through the camera, he could see that the situation was escalating. The woman was fighting harder now, her desperation evident even through the grainy footage. One of the men had produced something from his jacket. Harry couldn't tell if it was a weapon, but he wasn't going to wait to find out. "Central, I have eyes on a potential assault in progress. I'm responding immediately." He switched off the radio before Central could order him to stand down. The elevator to parking level 2 felt like it took forever, though Harry knew it was less than 30 seconds. His mind raced through possible scenarios. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe this was some kind of misunderstanding, a domestic dispute that would resolve itself, or friends playing a prank that had gotten out of hand. Maybe he was about to lose his job over a false alarm, but as the elevator doors opened, he was about to lose his job over a false alarm, but as the elevator doors opened, Harry heard the woman's voice echoing through the concrete parking structure. A voice filled with genuine terror. He knew he'd made the right choice. "Please, I don't have anything valuable. Just let me go." Harry moved quickly but quietly toward the sound, using parked cars for cover. The northeast corner of the parking garage was poorly lit, with one of the overhead fluorescent fixtures flickering intermittently. As he got closer, he could see the situation clearly for the first time. The woman Olivia, though he still didn't know her name, was pressed against the concrete wall near the elevators. The three men had formed a semicircle around her, effectively cutting off any escape route. They were all larger than she was, and their body language suggested experience with intimidation. "Come on, lady," one of them was saying, his voice carrying a mix of impatience and menace. "We know you've got it. Make this easy on yourself." "I told you, I don't know what you're talking about," Olivia replied, her voice shaking but determined. "You've got the wrong person." Harry was close enough now to see that Olivia was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her early 30s, with the kind of delicate features that made her current situation even more horrifying. She was clearly terrified, but there was something in her posture that suggested she wasn't going to give up without a fight. The largest of the three men stepped closer, and Harry saw the glint of metal in his hand. Not a gun, but definitely a knife. That's when Harry made his choice. "Hey," he called out, stepping into the open and shining his flashlight directly at the group. "Security. Back away from the lady right now." The effect was immediate. All three men spun toward Harry, their formation breaking as they tried to assess this new threat. Olivia took advantage of their momentary distraction to put more distance between herself and her attackers. "This isn't your business, security guard," the man with the knife said, though Harry noticed he didn't advance. The flashlight beam was clearly bothering him, and the authoritative tone in Harry's voice had introduced uncertainty into what had been a controlled situation. "Actually, it is my business," Harry replied, keying his radio with his free hand. "I'm calling the police right now. I suggest you gentlemen move along before they arrive." It was a bluff. Harry had already turned off his radio to avoid being ordered back to his post, and he couldn't call for backup without revealing that he'd abandoned his station. But the three men didn't know that. For a moment, the parking garage was filled with tense silence. Harry could hear his own heartbeat, the distant hum of traffic from the street below, and the rapid breathing of the woman he was trying to protect. Everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then the man with the knife made a decision that changed everything. "This isn't over," he said to Olivia, his voice filled with promise rather than threat. "We'll find you again." The three men melted away into the shadows of the parking garage as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving Harry and Olivia alone under the flickering fluorescent light. Harry kept his flashlight trained on the darkness where they'd disappeared, until he was sure they were really gone. Only then did he turn to look at the woman he'd just risked everything to save. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, approaching slowly so as not to frighten her further. Olivia was leaning against the wall, breathing heavily, her eyes still wide with shock and fear. But when she looked at Harry, he saw something else there too, a profound gratitude mixed with surprise, as if she couldn't quite believe that someone had actually helped her. "I'm okay," she said, though her voice was still shaking. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." Harry nodded, already thinking about the consequences of what he'd just done. Somewhere in the shopping center, the security cameras had recorded his absence from his post. Central had his radio communications on file. By tomorrow morning, he'd probably be looking for a new job, but looking at Olivia, really seeing the relief and gratitude in her eyes, Harry knew he'd make the same choice again. Some things were more important than job security, He had no way of knowing that this moment of moral clarity would cost him everything he'd worked for, or that the woman he'd just saved was about to change his life in ways he could never have. Imagine Dot in the immediate aftermath of the confrontation. The parking garage felt eerily quiet. The fluorescent light overhead continued its irregular flickering, casting shifting shadows across the concrete walls, and Harry could hear the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. But it was the silence between him and Olivia that felt most significant, a moment suspended in time, where two strangers tried to process what had just happened. Olivia was still pressed against the wall, her breathing gradually slowing from the rapid pace of fear to something approaching normal. Harry noticed that she kept glancing toward the shadows where the three men had disappeared, her body remaining tense and ready to run despite the apparent safety of the moment. "They're gone," Harry said gently, following her gaze. "I don't think they'll come back, at least not tonight. Too risky with security involved now." She nodded, but Harry could see that trust didn't come easily to her right now. Everything about her posture suggested someone who had learned to be cautious, to expect danger rather than safety. It made him wonder what kind of life she'd been living, what circumstances had led to this moment in a parking garage at nearly midnight. "I should get you somewhere safe," Harry continued. "There's a security office downstairs, or I can call the police if you'd prefer." "No," Olivia said quickly, then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, no police, please, it's complicated." Harry studied her face in the uncertain light. There was something in her expression, not guilt, but wariness. The kind of look he'd seen on Jamie's face when his son was trying to explain why he'd gotten in trouble at school without revealing the whole truth. Not deception, exactly, but careful omission. "Okay," Harry said simply. "No police. But you shouldn't be alone right now, and I don't feel comfortable leaving you in this garage." For the first time since he'd interrupted the confrontation, Olivia really looked at Harry, not just glancing at him or assessing whether he was a threat, but actually seeing him. He was aware that his security guard uniform was slightly rumpled from his quick movement through the parking garage, that his flashlight was an old, heavy model that the security company had probably been using for a decade, and that he probably looked more like someone's dad than anyone's idea of a heroic rescuer. "You came up here alone," she said, and there was something like wonder in her voice. "3 against 1, and you came up here anyway." Harry shrugged, uncomfortable with the admiration he heard in her tone. "It's my job to keep people safe." "No," Olivia said firmly. "Your job is to watch cameras and call the police. What you did that was a choice." She was right, of course. Harry had made a choice that went far beyond his job description, a choice that would probably cost him his employment and put his family's security at risk. But standing here in the aftermath, looking at this woman who had clearly been terrified and was now safe, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. "I'm Olivia," she said, extending her hand. "Olivia Smith." "Harry Walker." He shook her hand, noting that her grip was firm, despite the tremor he could still feel in her fingers. "And I'm glad you're okay. Thanks to you." She paused, studying his face. "Harry, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you going to get in trouble for this? For leaving your post?" Harry considered lying, offering some reassurance that would make her feel better about the situation. But there was something in Olivia's direct gaze that demanded honesty, a quality that suggested she'd had enough of people telling her what she wanted to hear instead of what she needed to know. "Probably," he admitted. "Security protocols are pretty strict about abandoning your station. And I turned off my radio when Central told me to return to monitoring, so that's another violation." Olivia's face fell. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I never meant for someone else to get hurt because of my problems." "Hey," Harry said, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't your fault. Those men chose to threaten you. I chose to help. Whatever consequences come from that, they're mine to deal with." But you have a family, don't you? Olivia asked. I can see it in the way you carry yourself. Someone depends on you. Harry was surprised by her perceptiveness. My son, Jamie, he's 10, and this job, it's important. For him, it's the job I have, Harry said simply. But it's not who I am. Olivia stared at him for a long moment, and Harry had the strange feeling that she was seeing something in him, that he didn't entirely understand himself. There was an intensity to her attention that went beyond gratitude, as if she was recognizing something familiar or significant. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? She asked suddenly. I know it's late, but there's a 24-hour diner about 6 blocks from here, Mel's place. I don't want to go home alone right now, and I'd like to thank you properly. Harry glanced at his watch. It was just past midnight, which meant he was supposed to be starting his hourly patrol of the shopping center. But given that he'd already violated protocol by leaving his post, and that he'd probably be fired as soon as his supervisor reviewed the evening's events, completing his shift seemed less important than making sure Olivia got somewhere safe. I'd like that, he said. But I should call in first. Let them know I'll be away from my station for a while longer. Harry, Olivia said quietly, if you're already in trouble, does it really matter at this point? She had a point. Harry was already facing termination for abandoning his post and ignoring direct orders from Central. Staying away longer wouldn't make his situation significantly worse, and the truth was, he didn't want to return to that small security office right now. He didn't want to sit alone with the weight of what he'd done and what it would cost his family. You're right, he said. Coffee sounds good. They walked together toward the parking garage exit, Harry keeping alert for any signs that the 3 men might have lingered in the area. But the garage felt genuinely empty now, just rows of expensive cars under fluorescent lights and the echo of their footsteps on concrete. Harry, Olivia said as they reached the street level, can I ask what made you become a security guard? It was an odd question, delivered with the kind of casual curiosity that suggested genuine interest rather than polite conversation. Harry found himself answering more honestly than he might have expected. I used to work at Brennan Manufacturing, factory work, steady pay, good benefits. But they closed the plant 2 years ago, moved production overseas. Security was the best job I could find that would hire someone without a college degree. And before the factory? The factory? Military, right out of high school. 4 years as an MP. That's where I learned to read situations, to trust my instincts about when something was wrong. Harry paused. Probably why I knew those men meant to hurt you, even before they pulled the knife, Olivia nodded thoughtfully. Military police. That explains a lot about how you handled yourself back there. Most people would have called for backup and waited. Most people would have been smarter about it, Harry said with a rueful smile. No, Olivia said firmly. Most people would have convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. They had reached the street now, and Harry could see Mel's diner in the distance, a small, brightly lit establishment that looked like it had been serving coffee and comfort food to late-night customers for decades. The kind of place where the waitresses knew regular customers by name and the coffee was strong enough to keep you awake, but gentle enough not to burn your stomach. As they walked, Harry found himself studying Olivia more carefully. Away from the crisis in the parking garage, he could see details he'd missed before. Her clothes were simple but well made, with the kind of subtle quality that suggested they'd been expensive, even if they weren't flashy. Her purse, which she still clutched carefully, was leather, not the fake stuff sold at discount stores, but real leather that had aged well. And despite everything she'd been through, there was something about her posture and the way she spoke that suggested education, refinement, a background that didn't quite match her current circumstances. Olivia, Harry said as they reached the diner's entrance. Can I ask you something? Of course. Those men, they said they knew you had something they wanted. and they seemed pretty determined to get it. Are you going to be safe after tonight? Olivia's expression grew guarded again, the openness that had characterized their conversation pulling back slightly. I hope so, she said. The situation is complicated, but I think I can handle it. It wasn't really an answer, but Harry didn't press. Whatever trouble Olivia was in, whatever those men had wanted from her, she clearly wasn't ready to share the full truth with a stranger, even a stranger who had risked his job to help her daughters. They entered the diner with its warm lighting and the comforting smell of coffee and pie. Harry couldn't shake the feeling that this was a beginning rather than an ending. He'd lost his job tonight, he was sure of that much. But he'd also met someone who seemed to see value in him, that went beyond his security guard uniform and steady paycheck. He didn't yet know that. Olivia Smith wasn't just grateful for his help, she was amazed by it. In a world where she'd grown accustomed to people wanting something from her, Harry had given something without expecting anything in return. And that kind of authentic kindness was rarer than she'd ever imagined it could be. But he was about to find out just how rare, and just how much that rarity was worth to someone who had spent years searching for it. Mel's Diner was exactly what Harry had expected: red vinyl booths with silver trim, a black and white checkered floor that had seen decades of late-night conversations, and the kind of fluorescent lighting that was bright enough to read by but gentle enough not to hurt tired eyes. The place smelled like coffee that had been brewing for hours and pie that had been made fresh that morning, with undertones of grilled onions and the lingering warmth of comfort food prepared by people who understood that sometimes what customers needed most wasn't just a meal, but a moment of peace. At nearly 12:30 a.m., the diner was sparsely populated, a long-haul trucker working on a plate of eggs and hash browns, an elderly man reading a newspaper while nursing what appeared to be his third cup of coffee, and a young couple sharing a piece of chocolate cake and speaking in the hushed tones of people falling in love. Harry and Olivia slid into a corner booth that offered privacy and a clear view of the entrance, though Harry wasn't sure if he was being cautious out of habit or because he genuinely worried that Olivia's troubles might follow them. "Thank you," Olivia said as they settled into their seats. "I know this isn't how you plan to spend your shift." Harry smiled, pulling off his security guard cap and running his hand through his hair. "Honestly, this is probably the most interesting shift I've had in 18 months. Usually, the biggest excitement is teenagers trying to sneak alcohol into the movie theater. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with graying hair, and the kind of efficient kindness that came from years of serving people at their most vulnerable, approached their table with coffee pot in hand. "Coffee for both?" she asked, and when they nodded, she filled their cups without ceremony. "You folks want to see menus, or do you know what you'd like?" "Just coffee for me," Olivia said. "Same here," Harry agreed, then paused. "Actually, do you have any of that apple pie? My son would never forgive me if I came to a place like this and didn't at least ask." The waitress smiled. "Made fresh this afternoon. You want it heated up? Please. And maybe a second piece to go, if that's not too much trouble." After the waitress left, Olivia studied Harry with renewed interest. "You're planning to take pie home to your son? Jamie has a sweet tooth, and I don't get to bring him treats very often." Harry stirred sugar into his coffee, feeling slightly self-conscious about the admission. Money's tight, and dessert usually falls into the luxury category. "Tell me about him," Olivia said, leaning forward slightly. "Jamie." Harry felt his expression soften automatically. Talking about Jamie was always easy, even with strangers, especially with strangers who seemed genuinely interested rather than just making polite conversation. "He's 10, brilliant, and way too mature for his age. His mother died when he was 7, and since then, it's just been the two of us figuring things out as we go." Harry paused, considering how much to share. He's got this incredible mind for mathematics, already working at a level that's above his grade, and he's fascinated by marine biology. Wants to study dolphins someday. That's quite a dream for a 10-year-old. Yeah, and I want him to have the chance to pursue it. That's why losing this job. Harry trailed off, realizing he was sharing more than he'd intended. That's why losing this job matters so much, Olivia finished gently. Because it's not just about you. Harry nodded. Everything I do is about making sure Jamie has opportunities I didn't have. College, choices, the chance to become whatever he wants to become, instead of just taking whatever work he can find. The waitress returned with Harry's apple pie, the crust golden and the filling still steaming from the oven. The aroma was exactly what comfort food should smell, like cinnamon and sugar, and the promise that some things in the world were still made with care. This looks amazing, Harry said, taking a bite. Jamie's going to love this. Olivia watched him eat with an expression that seemed thoughtful, almost analytical. Harry, can I ask you something personal? Sure. When you saw what was happening in that parking garage tonight, what went through your mind? In that moment when you had to decide whether to intervene? Harry considered the question, understanding that this wasn't casual curiosity. For some reason, his answer mattered to Olivia in a way that went beyond politeness. I thought about Jamie, he said honestly. Not about how losing my job would affect him, but about what kind of man I wanted him to see when he looked at his father. I thought about how I'd feel if someone I cared about was in that situation and strangers just walked by because it wasn't their problem. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup as if it contained answers to questions she hadn't yet figured out how to ask. That's remarkable, she said finally. Is it? I mean, I hope most people would do the same thing. No, Olivia said, her voice carrying a weight that suggested personal experience. Most people find reasons why it's not their responsibility. Most people convince themselves that someone else will handle it, or that getting involved will only make things worse. There was something in her tone that made Harry look at her more carefully. You sound like you speak from experience. Olivia smiled, but it was a sad expression. I've learned a lot about human nature in the past few years. About what people will do when they think no one is watching, and what they won't do even when everyone is. Harry sensed there was a story behind that statement, something significant about Olivia's recent past that had taught her difficult lessons about trust and character. But he also sensed that pushing for details would cause her to retreat behind the careful walls she'd already shown him she could construct. Well, he said instead, I'm sorry you've had experiences that taught you to expect less from people. So am I. Olivia looked up from her coffee, meeting his eyes directly. But tonight reminded me that there are still good people in the world. People who do the right thing because it's right, not because of what they might get out of it. Harry felt heat rise in his cheeks. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone who seemed as genuinely thoughtful as Olivia. I just did what anyone should do. No, Harry, you did what you should do. There's a difference. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the background noise of the diner creating a bubble of privacy around their conversation. Harry found himself studying Olivia more carefully, noticing details that his earlier adrenaline had caused him to miss. Her hands wrapped around her coffee cup were soft, not the hands of someone who did manual labor or struggled with the kind of financial stress that Harry knew intimately. Her clothing, while simple, had the subtle quality markers that suggested expense, the way the fabric draped, the precision of the stitching, the fact that everything fit perfectly. Even her posture suggested a background that included formal education, maybe professional training. Olivia, Harry said carefully, can I ask what you do for work? She hesitated, and Harry saw that guarded expression flicker across her face again. I'm between jobs right now, she said. Career transition. It was clearly a deflection, but Harry didn't press. Everyone had a right to privacy, and Olivia had already been through enough trauma for one evening. What about you? She asked, turning the conversation back toward him. Before the factory, before the military, what did you want to be when you grew up? Harry laughed. That's a question I haven't thought about in years. When I was Jamie's age, I wanted to be a teacher. History, specifically. I loved reading about how ordinary people ended up making extraordinary choices during difficult times. What changed? Reality, Harry said simply. Teachers need college degrees, and my family couldn't afford college. The military offered structure, training, and a way to serve something bigger than myself. The factory offered steady work with good benefits and security work. Well, security work was what was available when everything else fell apart. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. Do you ever think about going back to school, pursuing that teaching dream? Sometimes. Late at night when I'm doing payroll calculations and trying to figure out how to make the money stretch until the next paycheck. Harry smiled ruefully. But college costs money and time, and I have responsibilities now that make dreaming feel like a luxury I can't afford. Dreams aren't luxuries, Olivia said firmly. They're necessities. People who stop dreaming stop growing, stop believing that tomorrow can be better than today. There was passion in her voice, conviction that suggested she'd had this conversation before, maybe with herself, maybe with others who had tried to convince her to be practical rather than hopeful. That's a beautiful sentiment, Harry said. But dreams don't pay rent or buy groceries. No, Olivia agreed. But they're what make the rent and groceries worth working for. Harry studied her face, seeing something there that he couldn't quite identify. Determination, yes, but also a kind of fierce hope that seemed unusual in someone who had clearly been through difficult experiences recently. You speak like someone who's fought for her dreams, he observed. I speak like someone who's learned that the biggest tragedy isn't failing to achieve your dreams, Olivia replied. It's convincing yourself that you don't deserve them in the first place. The conversation was interrupted by the waitress returning with a paper bag containing Jamie's piece of pie. As Harry reached for his wallet, Olivia placed her hand gently on his arm. Please, she said, let me get this. After what you did tonight, coffee and pie seemed like a very small thank you. Harry started to protest, but something in Olivia's expression stopped him. This wasn't charity or pity. It was genuine gratitude from someone who understood the value of what he'd sacrificed. Thank you, he said simply. As they prepared to leave the diner, Olivia turned to him with an expression that seemed almost vulnerable. Harry, I know this might sound strange, but would it be okay if I called you tomorrow? To check on how things went with your job and to make sure you're all right? Harry wrote his number on a napkin, surprised by how much he hoped she would actually call. I'd like that, he said. Though I should warn you, tomorrow might not be a great day for good news. Sometimes the worst days are when we most need to hear from people who care, Olivia replied. As they walked out into the cool night air, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point, not just because of the job he was about to lose, but because of the connection he'd made with someone who seemed to see possibilities in him that he'd forgotten existed. He didn't yet know that Olivia Smith was already planning ways to ensure that his act of courage wouldn't go unrewarded, or that she had resources at her disposal that could change his life in ways he'd never dared to imagine. Harry returned to Millbrook Shopping Center at 1:47 a.m., the paper bag containing Jamie's pie growing cold in his passenger seat as he sat in his car, staring up at the building that had provided his family's livelihood for the past 18 months. The parking garage looked different, now not just because of what had happened there, but because Harry knew he was seeing it for probably the last time as an employee rather than a visitor. His radio had been buzzing intermittently with calls from Central Dispatch, each message growing progressively more urgent and formal. Walker, report to security office immediately. Walker, respond to Central Dispatch. Security Officer Walker, you are required to return to your assigned station for debriefing. Harry had ignored them all, knowing that the conversation waiting For him would be brief and final. The security office felt smaller when Harry finally entered it, as if the walls had contracted during his absence. His supervisor, Rick Martinez, was waiting along with a man Harry didn't recognize, tall, thin, wearing a suit despite the late hour, with the kind of expression that suggested he was used to delivering bad news and had gotten good at it. "Harry," Rick said, his voice carrying a mixture of disappointment and resignation. "This is Mr. Davidson from corporate security. We need to talk." Davidson stepped forward, consulting a tablet that undoubtedly contained a detailed record of Harry's violations. "Officer Walker, at approximately 11:52 p.m. tonight, you abandoned your assigned monitoring station without authorization. At 11:54 p.m., you ignored direct orders from Central Dispatch to return to your post. At 12:03 a.m., you turned off your radio to avoid further communication from supervisory personnel. Can you confirm these facts?" Harry looked at Rick, seeing genuine regret in his supervisor's eyes. They'd worked together for over a year, and Rick had always been fair, even supportive when Harry had requested schedule changes to accommodate Jamie's school events. "Yes," Harry said simply. "Those facts are accurate." Davidson made a note on his tablet. "And can you explain why you chose to violate multiple security protocols during a single shift?" Harry considered his options. He could explain about Olivia, about the three men, about the moral imperative that had driven him to intervene. But he understood that from corporate security's perspective, the reasons didn't matter. He had abandoned his post, ignored orders, and compromised the security operations' integrity. In their world, good intentions were irrelevant if they came at the cost of procedures designed to protect both employees and clients. "I witnessed a situation that required immediate intervention," Harry said. "I made a judgment call." "Officer Walker," Davidson continued, "your employment contract specifically states that security personnel are required to contact law enforcement for any situation requiring intervention beyond standard protocols. At no point are individual officers authorized to abandon their monitoring stations to personally involve themselves in incidents." "I understand." Davidson exchanged a glance with Rick before continuing. "Given the severity of these violations, Millbrook Security Solutions is terminating your employment effective immediately. You'll need to surrender your radio, flashlight, and identification badge. Final paycheck will be processed within 3 business days, minus any equipment replacement. Costs if applicable." Harry had expected this outcome, but hearing it stated officially still felt like a punch to the stomach. 18 months of steady work, gone. The security that had allowed him to provide for Jamie, to maintain their small apartment, to believe that tomorrow would be manageable, all of it erased by 30 seconds of moral clarity. "I understand," Harry repeated, beginning to remove his equipment. "Rick, I'm sorry to put you in this position." Rick Martinez looked genuinely pained. "Harry, you're a good man and a reliable employee. If there was any way to work around this ... I know." Harry handed over his radio and badge. "I made my choice. I live with the consequences." As Harry walked out of Millbrook Shopping Center for the last time, carrying only his car keys and the bag containing Jamie's pie, he felt a strange mixture of regret and relief. Regret for the financial security he'd lost. Relief that he'd acted according to his principles when it mattered most. He thought about Olivia, about the fear in her eyes when those men had cornered her, and knew that despite everything, he would make the same choice again. The drive home took him through neighborhoods that seemed different and nearly 3 megua quieter, more intimate, with porch lights creating small pools of warmth in the darkness. Harry found himself thinking about his conversation with Olivia at the diner, about her insights into human nature and her conviction that dreams were necessities rather than luxuries. Easy words to believe in a warm, well-lit restaurant, harder to embrace when you were driving home to explain to your son that Daddy had lost another job. Harry parked outside their apartment building and sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to formulate what he would tell Jamie in the morning. The boy was too smart to accept vague explanations about job changes or new opportunities. He would want to know what had happened, why his father had made choices that put their stability at risk. And Harry would have to find a way to explain moral courage to a 10-year-old who depended on his father's practical decisions for security and survival. Inside the apartment, everything was exactly as Harry had left it, Jamie's homework still organized on the kitchen table, the boy's inhaler positioned on the counter where it was always supposed to be, the small television quietly humming in standby mode. Mrs. Chun had left a note saying that Jamie had finished his homework, eaten his dinner, and gone to bed at 9:30 without any problems. Normal life, continuing its routine while Harry's world shifted beneath his feet. Harry put Jamie's pie in the refrigerator and sat down at the kitchen table, where his son had been working on fractions just hours earlier. The problems looked impossibly simple, now clean equations with definitive answers, unlike the complex calculations of adult responsibility that Harry was trying to solve. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Harry, this is Olivia. I hope you made it home safely. I wanted to thank you again for everything tonight. Sleep well." Harry stared at the message for a long time. It was a simple expression of gratitude, the kind of polite follow-up that anyone might send after an eventful evening. But something about it felt significant, as if Olivia was reaching out across the distance between their worlds to maintain a connection that had surprised them both. He typed back, "Made it home fine. Thank you for the coffee and conversation. It helped more than you know." Her response came quickly. "Would it be okay if I called you tomorrow afternoon? I'd like to hear how things went with your supervisors." Harry hesitated before responding. Part of him wanted to maintain the connection with Olivia, to continue the conversation they'd started at the diner. But another part of him recognized that their circumstances were fundamentally different, and that whatever troubles had brought her to that parking garage tonight, they probably didn't include worrying about how to pay rent or explaining unemployment. To a 10-year-old, still, there had been something genuine in their interaction, something that transcended the dramatic circumstances of their meeting. Olivia had listened to him talk about his dreams of teaching with the kind of attention that suggested she understood the difference between fantasies and legitimate aspirations that had been postponed by necessity. "Yes," he typed back. Like that. Good. And Harry? Whatever happened tonight at work, it doesn't define your worth as a person or as a father. Jamie is lucky to have someone who shows him that doing the right thing matters more than playing it safe." Harry read the message 3 times, feeling something ease in his chest that he hadn't realized was tight. Olivia barely knew him, had no real understanding of his relationship with Jamie or the pressures he faced as a single father. But her words carried a conviction that made him believe, at least for a moment, that losing his job might not be the disaster he'd assumed it would be. The next morning came too early and too bright. Harry woke to the sound of Jamie moving around the apartment, getting ready for school with the efficiency of a boy who had learned to be self-sufficient. Harry could hear him in the kitchen, probably pouring cereal and checking his backpack to make sure he had everything he needed for the day. "Dad?" Jamie called. "You're home early. Did something happen at work?" Harry took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, where Jamie was indeed eating cereal while reviewing his math homework one final time. The boy looked up with the kind of direct, perceptive gaze that never failed to remind Harry that his son was extraordinarily observant for a 10-year-old. "Something did happen," Harry said, sitting down across from Jamie. "I need to tell you about it." Jamie set down his spoon, giving Harry his complete attention. "Are you in trouble?" "I lost my job last night." Jamie's expression didn't change immediately, but Harry could see him processing the information, calculating what it might mean for their routine, their security, their future. "Why?" Jamie asked simply. Harry considered how much of the truth a 10-year-old could handle, then decided that Jamie deserved an honest explanation. I saw someone who needed help, and I chose to help them instead of following the rules about staying at my security station. My supervisors decided that was enough reason to fire me. Jamie was quiet for a moment, stirring his cereal thoughtfully. Was it the right thing to do? Helping the person? Yes, Harry said without hesitation. It was definitely the right thing to do. Then you made the right choice, Jamie concluded with the kind of moral clarity that only children seem to possess. We'll figure out the rest. Harry felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was exactly the response he should have expected. From Jamie, practical acceptance combined with unwavering support, trust that his father had acted according to principles that mattered more than job security. We will figure it out, Harry agreed. It might be challenging for a while, but we'll make it work. Dad, Jamie said, returning to his cereal. Did you bring me that pie you mentioned? Harry smiled, grateful for the change of subject. It's in the refrigerator. Apple pie from Mel's Diner. Can I have it for breakfast? Absolutely not, Harry said, but he was still smiling. You can have it after school, with a proper lunch first. As Jamie finished getting ready for school, Harry found himself thinking about Olivia's promise to call that afternoon. He was curious about what she wanted to discuss, about whether their connection would translate to daylight conversation, or if it had been simply a product of unusual circumstances and late-night vulnerability. But more than that, he found himself hoping that Olivia was safe, that whatever trouble had brought those men looking for her had been resolved, and that she wasn't facing the kind of difficult decisions that Harry was now confronting about employment and financial security. He had no way of knowing that at that very moment, Olivia was sitting in an office across the city, making phone calls and arrangements that would ensure Harry Walker never had to worry about unemployment again. He couldn't have imagined that the woman he'd helped was not only grateful for his intervention, but possessed the resources and determination to transform his life in ways that would honor both his sacrifice and his dreams. But he was about to find out that sometimes the universe had a way of balancing the scales. And that courage, even when it came at great personal cost, had a way of creating opportunities that caution and self-preservation never could. Harry spent the morning after losing his job doing what practical men do when faced with financial crisis. He sat at his kitchen table with a calculator, a notebook, and a growing sense of controlled panic as he worked through their household budget. The numbers were stark and unforgiving. Without his security guard salary, they had enough savings to cover rent and utilities for exactly 6 weeks, assuming they cut all non-essential expenses, and Jamie didn't need anything unexpected like new shoes or school supplies. The apartment felt different in daylight, smaller, more fragile, as if the walls themselves understood that their stability had been compromised. Harry found himself noticing details he usually ignored. The small water stain on the ceiling that probably indicated a roof problem the landlord hadn't addressed. The way the refrigerator's humming had gotten louder over the past few months. The careful way Jamie had arranged his art supplies so that nothing took up unnecessary space. At 10:30 a.m., Harry's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice was immediately familiar. Mr. Walker? This is Linda Patterson from Westfield Elementary. I'm calling about Jamie. Harry's stomach dropped. In his current situation, any unexpected call about his son felt like a potential catastrophe. Is everything okay? Is Jamie hurt? Oh no, nothing like that, Mrs. Patterson said quickly. Jamie is fine. Actually, I'm calling with some rather unusual news. We've received a call from someone claiming to be a family friend who would like to sponsor Jamie for our advanced mathematics program. Harry sat down heavily in his kitchen chair. I'm sorry, what? The advanced math program is typically quite expensive. It includes after-school tutoring, weekend workshops, and preparation for regional competitions. The cost is usually about $800 per semester, which puts it out of reach for many families. But this morning, someone called asking about sponsoring Jamie specifically, covering all costs and even providing transportation if needed. Harry's mind raced. He knew exactly one person who might have Jamie's school information, who had heard him talk about his son's mathematical abilities, who had learned enough about their financial situation to understand that such a program would be impossible for them to afford. "Mrs. Patterson, can you tell me who called?" "That's the unusual part," she said. The caller identified herself as Miss Smith, said she was a family friend who wanted to remain anonymous. She's already arranged to have the full payment transferred to the school's account, and she specifically requested that we contact you to see if Jamie would be interested in participating. Harry closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. Olivia's generosity was extraordinary, but it also highlighted the vast difference between their circumstances in a way that made him acutely aware of his own limitations as a provider. "Mr. Walker, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here." "Mrs. Patterson, I need to discuss this with the sponsor before I can give you an answer. Can you hold off on enrolling Jamie until tomorrow?" "Of course. But Mr. Walker, I hope you'll seriously consider this opportunity. Jamie is exceptionally gifted in mathematics, and this program could really help him develop his potential." After ending the call, Harry sat staring at his phone, trying to process what had just happened. Olivia had not only remembered their conversation about Jamie's abilities, but had taken concrete action to create opportunities for a boy she'd never met. The gesture was so far beyond ordinary gratitude that it suggested resources and generosity that Harry was only beginning to understand. His phone rang again at 2:15 p.m., and this time Olivia's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hello, Harry," she said, and her voice carried the same warmth he remembered from their conversation at the diner. "How are you holding up today?" "I'm managing," Harry said. "Thank you for asking. But Olivia, I need to ask you about something. Did you call Jamie's school this morning?" There was a brief pause before she answered. "I did. I hope that's okay. After hearing you talk about Jamie's mathematical abilities, I did some research on educational opportunities in your area. The advanced program at Westfield Elementary has an excellent reputation." "Olivia, that's incredibly generous, but I can't accept something like that. The cost alone—" "Harry," she interrupted gently, "can I ask you something? When you saw me in that parking garage last night, did you stop to calculate what helping me might cost you?" Harry considered the question. "No, I just acted." "Exactly. You saw someone who needed help, and you provided it without thinking about the personal consequences. That's who you are, someone who gives because it's right, not because it's convenient or affordable." "But this is different," Harry protested. "This is about money, about charity. This is about opportunity," Olivia said firmly. "This is about making sure that a brilliant boy has the chance to develop his gifts, regardless of his family's financial circumstances. You said last night that everything you do is about giving Jamie opportunities you didn't have. I'm simply offering to help with that." Harry walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where Jamie would be walking home from school in a few hours. "Olivia, who are you, really? Because the cost of that program isn't pocket change, and you're talking about it like it doesn't matter." Another pause, longer this time. When Olivia spoke again, her voice carried a different quality, more serious, more careful. "You're right to ask," she said. "I haven't been entirely honest with you about my circumstances. The truth is, I'm in a position where I can afford to help, and last night you showed me something that reminded me why having resources matters. It's so you can use them to make a difference in people's lives." "That's still not really an answer," Harry said. "I know, and you deserve a better one. Harry, would you be willing to meet me this afternoon? Somewhere public, somewhere you'd feel comfortable?" I think there are some things I should explain in person. Harry checked the time. Jamie would be home from school in 2 hours, and Harry had planned to spend the afternoon looking through job listings online, making calls to potential employers, doing the practical work of damage control that unemployment required. Where did you have in mind? There's a coffee shop called the Daily Grind on Maple Street, near the University District. It's busy enough to feel safe, quiet enough for conversation. Would 4 o'clock work? Harry knew the place a popular spot, with college students and professionals, the kind of establishment that served expensive coffee drinks and attracted customers who could afford to spend money on atmosphere as well as caffeine. Not his usual environment, but public and safe. I'll be there, he said. Thank you, Harry, and please think about the math program for Jamie, whatever you decide about accepting help from me. Don't let pride prevent your son from having opportunities he's earned. After ending the call, Harry spent the next hour researching the Daily Grind online, trying to understand what kind of place Olivia had chosen for their meeting. The coffee shop's website showed a sleek, modern interior with comfortable seating, areas, and a menu that included items like $12 artisanal pour-over coffee and $8 organic pastries. It was clearly the kind of establishment that catered to customers for whom price was less important than quality and ambiance. Harry arrived at the Daily Grind 15 minutes early, wanting to scope out the environment and choose a seating area that would provide privacy for their conversation. The interior was exactly what he'd expected from the website: exposed brick walls, industrial lighting fixtures, and the kind of carefully curated aesthetic that made everything look effortlessly expensive. The clientele was equally predictable. University professors grading papers over elaborate coffee drinks, young professionals working on laptops while talking loudly about their startup ideas, and well-dressed individuals who seemed to be conducting business meetings over $15 lunch. Selections. Harry felt underdressed in his khakis and polo shirt, but he found a corner table that offered good visibility and settled in to wait. Olivia arrived at exactly 4 o'clock, and Harry was struck again by how she managed to look both elegant and understated. She wore a simple black dress with a charcoal blazer, minimal jewelry, and carried a leather handbag that was clearly expensive, but not ostentatious. Everything about her appearance suggested someone who was comfortable in environments like this, who belonged in spaces where $12 coffee was considered reasonable. Thank you for coming, she said, settling into the chair across from him. I know this must feel strange. A little, Harry admitted. Yesterday you were a stranger in a parking garage. Today you're offering to pay for my son's education. It's a significant shift. Olivia smiled, but Harry could see nervousness in her expression. I understand your confusion. I haven't been completely forthright about my circumstances, and you deserve to understand who you're dealing with. A server approached their table, a young woman with multiple piercings and an art history textbook tucked under her arm. What can I get you folks today? I'll have a cappuccino, Olivia said, and whatever he'd like is on me. Harry glanced at the menu, noting that even the basic coffee options cost more than he typically spent on an entire meal. Just regular coffee, black. After the server left, Olivia leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. Harry, my full name is Olivia Catherine Smith Hartwell. My family owns Hartwell Industries, manufacturing, real estate development, some technology investments. I've been involved in running the family foundation for the past 5 years, which focuses on educational opportunities and community development. Harry stared at her, pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicking into place. Hartwell Industries was one of the largest employers in the region, the kind of company whose headquarters dominated the downtown skyline and whose charitable donations made headlines in the local newspaper. You're telling me you're part of the Hartwell family? He asked. I am. And before you ask, yes, that means I have access to considerable resources. It also means that I've spent most of my adult life surrounded by people who want something from me: business partnerships, charitable contributions, social connections. What happened last night was unusual because you helped me without knowing who I was, without any expectation of reward or recognition. The server returned with their drinks, and Harry used the interruption to process what Olivia had just revealed. The woman he'd helped wasn't just wealthy, she was part of one of the most prominent families in the state. The math program she'd offered to fund for Jamie wasn't a significant expense for her. It was probably the equivalent of pocket change. "The men in the parking garage," Harry said finally. "They knew who you were." Olivia nodded grimly. "I've been receiving threats for the past few months. Nothing specific enough for law enforcement to act on, but persistent enough to be concerning. Last night I was coming back from a meeting about a new community center project when they cornered me. They wanted information about family business dealings, thought they could intimidate me into providing access to confidential information. And you were alone because I was trying to prove to myself that I could handle a simple meeting. Without security accompaniment," Olivia said with a rueful smile. "Pride and stubbornness, basically. Not my best decision-making." Harry sipped his coffee, thinking about the implications of what she'd told him. "So when you offered to help Jamie, you were being charitable to someone who helped you out of a difficult situation?" "No," Olivia said firmly. "When I offered to help Jamie, I was recognizing someone who embodies the kind of character and values that my family's foundation exists to support. Harry, you lost your job because you chose to help a stranger. You showed moral courage that's remarkable and rare. The fact that you happen to have a brilliant son who could benefit from educational opportunities just makes the situation more meaningful, not more charitable." Charitable. Harry leaned back in his chair, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Olivia was offering and what she represented. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me help," Olivia replied. "Say you'll accept that sometimes the universe finds ways to reward people who do the right thing, even when it costs them everything." Harry looked across the table at this woman who had transformed from a stranger in distress to a powerful figure, offering to change his family's circumstances, and realized that his answer would determine not just Jamie's educational future, but the entire trajectory of their lives. The decision felt enormous, weighted with implications he was only beginning to understand. But as he thought about Jamie's face when discussing mathematical concepts that fascinated him, about the dreams his son harbored for studying marine life, about the opportunities that might be possible with the right educational foundation, Harry began to understand that accepting help wasn't about charity or pride. It was about recognizing that sometimes extraordinary things happen to ordinary people, and that grace could arrive in the most unexpected forms. The silence that followed, Olivia's revelation stretched between them like a bridge that neither was quite ready to cross. Harry stared into his coffee cup, watching the steam rise and dissipate, trying to process the magnitude of what he'd just learned. Across from him sat a woman whose family name was synonymous with power and influence throughout the state, the same family whose charitable foundation had funded the new wing at Jamie's school, whose business ventures employed thousands of people, whose social and political connections could open doors that Harry had never even imagined existed. "I need some time to think about this," Harry said finally, his voice careful and measured. Olivia nodded, though he could see disappointment flicker across her features. "Of course. This is a lot to absorb, and I don't want you to feel pressured into making any decisions quickly." "It's not just about the math program," Harry continued, looking up from his coffee to meet her eyes. "If I accept help from you, from your family, what does that make me? What does that make this relationship between us?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that both of them understood. Harry wasn't just asking about financial assistance. He was asking about power dynamics, about the difference between charity and genuine connection, about whether their bond could survive the revelation of such dramatically different circumstances. It makes you someone who cares enough about his son's future to put aside pride when an opportunity presents itself, Olivia said softly. And it makes our relationship whatever we choose to make it. Harry shook his head. You say that like it's simple, but it's not. You're offering to pay for things I can't afford, to solve problems I can't solve on my own. How is that a relationship between equals? Harry, Olivia leaned forward, her voice taking on an intensity that demanded his attention. Last night, you risked your job and potentially your safety to help someone you didn't know. You gave something precious, your security, your livelihood, to protect a stranger. The fact that I have money doesn't diminish the value of what you offered. If anything, it should make it more meaningful, not less. Should it? Harry asked. Because right now, it feels like I'm being rewarded for doing something that any decent person would do, and that doesn't sit right with me. The conversation was interrupted by Harry's phone buzzing with a text message. He glanced at it, expecting perhaps a follow-up from Mrs. Patterson about the math program, but instead saw a message from an unknown number. Mr. Walker, this is Detective Sarah Chun with the City Police. We'd like to speak with you about an incident at Millbrook Shopping Center last night. Please call at your earliest convenience. Harry showed the message to Olivia, whose expression immediately became tense. They probably want to interview you about what you witnessed, she said. The men who attacked me, we filed a report this morning. You filed a report? But last night you said no police. Olivia looked uncomfortable. After thinking about it, my family's security team convinced me that we needed to create an official record. These men have been escalating their harassment, and we need documentation if we're going to pursue legal action. Harry felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Your family's security team. Olivia, what exactly am I walking into here? What kind of trouble are you really in? She hesitated, and Harry could see her weighing how much truth to reveal. The threats I mentioned, they're not random. There's a business deal my family's involved in, a major development project that some people want to see fail. The men last night were trying to get information they could use to sabotage the project. And now I'm a witness to attempted corporate espionage, Harry said, understanding beginning to dawn. Which means I'm part of whatever this is, whether I want to be or not. It's not that dramatic, Olivia said quickly. The police just need your statement about what you saw. It's routine. But Harry was already thinking through the implications. If he became involved in a police investigation related to the Hartwell family's business dealings, his unemployment situation would become the least of his concerns. Corporate espionage cases could drag on for months or years, requiring testimony, depositions, potentially even threats to his own safety if the people involved decided he was a witness they couldn't afford to leave alive. I need to go, Harry sighed, standing abruptly. I need to pick up Jamie from school, and I need to think about all of this. Harry, please don't let this scare you away from accepting help for Jamie, Olivia said, also standing. Whatever complications arise from the legal situation, they don't change the fact that your son deserves educational opportunities. Harry paused, looking at her carefully. That's exactly the problem, Olivia. You're talking about my son's education. Like it's separate from everything else, but it's not. If I accept your help, Jamie and I become connected to your world, your family, your business, your problems. Last night I thought I was helping a woman in trouble. Today I'm finding out I might have stepped into the middle of something much bigger and more dangerous. The coffee shop continued its normal afternoon rhythm around them, students studying, professionals meeting, the soft hum of conversation, and espresso machines, but Harry felt as though he and Olivia were standing in a bubble of tension that separated them from the ordinary world. You're right, Olivia said finally. I should have been more honest about the potential complications. But Harry, please don't let fear of my family's problems prevent you from doing what's best for Jamie. And please don't use my love for my Son, to manipulate me into accepting help I'm not comfortable with, Harry replied, his voice sharper than he'd intended. Olivia flinched as if he'd slapped her. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? You research my son's school, find an expensive program he'd benefit from, arrange to pay for it, and then reveal that you're part of one of the most powerful families in the state. You're making it impossible for me to say no without feeling like I'm denying Jamie opportunities he deserves. I'm offering you a chance to give your son advantages that talent alone can't provide, Olivia said, her voice rising slightly. Advantages that you yourself said you wanted him to have. At what cost? Harry demanded. My independence? My self-respect? The ability to look my son in the eye and tell him that everything we have, we earned honestly? Several other customers had begun to notice their conversation, and Harry realized they were creating a scene in exactly the kind of public space where Olivia probably couldn't afford to have dramatic confrontations. He lowered his voice, but his intensity remained. I need time to think, he said. About the math program, about the police investigation, about all of it. I can't make these kinds of decisions with you sitting across from me, talking about opportunities. And advantages like they don't come with strings attached. Olivia's expression softened slightly. There are no strings, Harry. I'm not asking for anything in return. That's what makes it worse, Harry said. If you wanted something from me, at least I'd understand the transaction. This feels like charity, no matter how you try to frame it otherwise. He started to leave, then turned back. And Olivia? Next time you want to help someone, maybe start by being honest about who you are and what kind of complications might come with accepting that help. Some of us can't afford to get caught up in other people's problems, no matter how good their intentions. Harry walked out of the daily grind feeling frustrated, confused, and angry, not just at Olivia, but at himself for allowing emotions and gratitude to cloud his judgment about accepting help from someone whose world was so far removed from his own. The 15-minute drive to Jamie's school gave him time to think about the conversation, about the choices he was facing, about what was best for his son versus what felt right for his own sense of dignity and independence. By the time he pulled up outside Westfield Elementary, Harry had reached a decision about the math program, the police investigation, and Olivia Smith Hartwell. It wasn't the decision that would provide the most opportunities for Jamie, and it wasn't the choice that would solve their immediate financial problems. But it was the decision that would allow Harry to sleep at night, knowing that whatever happened to their family, they had earned it themselves. He just hoped that when he explained his reasoning to Jamie that evening, his brilliant 10-year-old son would understand that sometimes the most important lessons weren't about mathematics or marine biology, but about the price of maintaining your integrity when the world offered easier alternatives. As Jamie climbed into the passenger seat, backpack full of homework and face bright with excitement about his day, Harry realized that the real test wasn't whether he could accept help from Olivia. The real test was whether he could explain to his son why he was choosing to turn it down, and whether Jamie would respect that decision or resent it. How was school, buddy? Harry asked, trying to keep his voice normal despite the turmoil in his mind. Great. Mrs. Patterson said someone called about sponsoring me for the advanced math program. She said it would mean extra classes and competitions and really challenging problems. Jamie's enthusiasm was infectious, his face glowing with the kind of excitement that came from being recognized for his abilities. Dad, can I do it, please? Harry looked at his son, brilliant, hopeful, deserving of every opportunity the world could offer, and felt his resolution waver. This wasn't just about his own pride or comfort with accepting help. This was about Jamie's future, about mathematical gifts that deserve nurturing regardless of their family's financial limitations. We need to talk about that tonight, Harry said carefully. There are some things about the program that I need to explain to you first. As they drove home through neighborhoods that seemed unchanged despite the fact that Harry's entire world had shifted in the past 24 hours. He wondered if he was making the right choice for the right reasons, or if he was allowing pride to prevent his son from accessing opportunities that could change the trajectory of Jamie's entire life. The evening ahead would require one of the most difficult conversations Harry had ever had with his son, explaining why sometimes doing the right thing meant saying no to extraordinary opportunities, and why maintaining their independence might be more important than accepting help that came with complications they weren't prepared to navigate. But first, he had to call Detective Chun and find out exactly what kind of legal situation he'd stumbled into when he decided to help a stranger in a parking garage. The decision felt enormous, weighted with implications that would affect not just their immediate circumstances but their relationship with each other and their place in a world where good intentions and financial resources created complications that Harry had never anticipated he'd need to navigate. Detective Sarah Chen met Harry at the police station that evening, and within 15 minutes of their conversation, Harry understood that his situation was far more serious than he'd realized. The three men who had cornered Olivia weren't just corporate harassers. They were part of an organized group that had been targeting Hartwell Industries executives and their families for months, seeking insider information about a massive development project that could reshape the city's economic landscape. "Mr. Walker," Detective Chun said, reviewing her notes, "your intervention last night may have prevented more than just an assault. We believe these individuals were planning to kidnap Ms. Hartwell and hold her until her family provided sensitive business information." Harry felt the blood drain from his face. "Kidnapping? The evidence suggests it, which means your testimony will be crucial in our case against them. We've arrested 2 of the 3 men based on security footage from the shopping center, and we need your statement to ensure they can't claim this was a misunderstanding or consensual encounter." The implications crashed over Harry like a wave. This wasn't a simple assault case that would require a single court appearance. This was a federal crime involving one of the region's most prominent families, which meant lawyers, media attention, and potentially months of legal proceedings. It also meant that Harry and Jamie's safety might be at risk if the third suspect remained at large. "Detective, what kind of protection can you offer?" "I have a 10-year-old son. We'll arrange for increased patrols in your neighborhood, and we can discuss temporary relocation if the threat assessment warrants it. But Mr. Walker, I want you to understand your willingness to testify could be the difference between these men facing serious consequences or walking away with minimal charges." Harry drove home from the police station with his mind spinning. The conversation with Jamie that he'd been dreading now seemed insignificant compared to explaining why they might need to leave their apartment, change their routine, and live with the constant awareness that dangerous people knew who they were and where to find them. Jamie was at the kitchen table when Harry arrived, homework spread out in careful organization, working through advanced mathematical concepts that most adults couldn't comprehend. The sight of his son focused, brilliant, completely unaware that their world had become exponentially more complicated made Harry's chest tightened with protective fear. "Dad?" Jamie looked up from his work. Mrs. Patterson called again. "She said the math program starts next week, and she needs to know if I'm participating." Harry sat down across from Jamie, studying his son's eager expression. "Buddy, we need to talk about more than just the math program. Some things have happened that might affect our routine for a while." Over the next hour, Harry explained as much as he felt Jamie could handle, that the woman he'd helped was in serious trouble, that helping her meant Harry might need to testify in court, and that their safety could be at risk until the people involved were caught and prosecuted. "So the lady you helped, she's really important?" Jamie asked. "She's from a prominent family, yes. And the people who were threatening her are dangerous." Jamie processed this information with the analytical mind that made him exceptional at mathematics. "Dad, if you hadn't helped her, she could have been hurt badly, right?" "Yes, And now because you helped her, we might be in danger too. It's possible. Jamie nodded thoughtfully. But you'd do it again, wouldn't you? Even knowing what you know now? The question cut straight to the heart of everything Harry had been struggling with. Yes, he said without hesitation. I would. Then we'll figure out the rest, Jamie said with the kind of simple wisdom that reminded Harry why he fought so hard to protect this remarkable boy. What about the math program? Harry pulled out his phone and showed Jamie the research he'd done that afternoon. The woman who offered to sponsor you, her name is Olivia, and she's the person I helped last night. Her family has more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes, and she wants to pay for your education because she's grateful for what I did. That sounds nice, Jamie said carefully. But you don't want to accept it. I'm conflicted about it. Harry admitted. On one hand, you deserve every opportunity to develop your abilities. On the other hand, accepting help from Olivia means becoming connected to her world, her problems, her family's complications. Jamie was quiet for several minutes, working through the implications with the same methodical approach he applied to mathematical proofs. Dad, he said finally, what if we could find a way to accept the help that doesn't make you feel bad about accepting it? What do you mean? What if instead of just taking the money, we found a way to earn it? Like, what if I tutored other kids in math or helped with the Foundation's education programs? Then it wouldn't be charity, it would be like a job. Harry stared at his son, amazed once again by Jamie's ability to see solutions that adults missed. That's actually a really interesting idea. Plus, Jamie continued, if I'm working with the Foundation, I'd learn about how rich people decide where to give their money. That could be useful someday when I'm a famous marine biologist and want to fund my own research projects. Harry laughed despite everything they were facing. You've got this all figured out, don't you? Not all of it, Jamie said seriously. But I know that you helped someone who needed help, and now she wants to help us. Maybe the complicated part isn't whether we should accept it, but how we accept it in a way that makes everyone feel good about the arrangement. That night, after Jamie had gone to bed, Harry sat at his kitchen table and composed a text message to Olivia. It took him 45 minutes and 7 drafts to find the right words. I've been thinking about our conversation today. I was wrong to question your motives, and I'm sorry for that. If the offer still stands, I'd like to discuss Jamie's participation in the math program. But I'd also like to explore whether there might be ways for him to contribute to your Foundation's work in exchange for the educational support. Would you be willing to meet again tomorrow? Her response came within minutes. Yes, and Harry, thank you for giving us another chance to figure this out together. As Harry finally headed to bed, he realized that Jamie had taught him something crucial that afternoon. Sometimes the answer to complicated problems wasn't choosing between 2 difficult options, but finding a third option that honored everyone's needs and values. Tomorrow, he would meet with Olivia again. This time, instead of approaching the conversation as a debate about charity versus independence, he would approach it as a collaboration between people who shared the goal of helping a brilliant boy reach his potential while maintaining the dignity and integrity that made that goal worth pursuing in the first place. The second meeting took place in a completely different setting, the public library's community room, neutral territory that belonged to neither Harry's working-class world nor Olivia's privileged sphere. When Harry arrived, he found Olivia already there, sitting at a simple conference table with a folder of documents and 2 cups of coffee from the library's small cafe. Thank you for reconsidering, she said as Harry took the seat across from her. The tension from their previous encounter had been replaced by something that felt more like cautious optimism. Thank you for being patient with my stubbornness, Harry replied. Jamie helped me understand that I was asking the wrong question. Olivia raised an eyebrow. What was the right question? Instead of asking whether I could accept help, I should have been asking how we could work together in a way that benefits everyone involved. Over the next hour, they developed a plan that surprised both of them with its elegance. Jamie would participate in the advanced mathematics program, but he would also spend 4 hours each Saturday working with the Hartwell Foundation's education initiative, tutoring younger students, helping design curriculum materials, and eventually presenting his own research projects at the Foundation's annual education symposium. "He's 10 years old," Harry said with a smile. "Are you sure he can handle that level of responsibility? You've described a boy who organizes his homework with military precision and dreams of studying marine ecosystems," Olivia replied. "I think he can handle whatever we ask of him." More importantly, the arrangement provided Harry with an opportunity as well. The foundation needed someone to coordinate community outreach for their education programs, someone who understood working families, who could communicate with parents who might be suspicious of help from wealthy foundations, who could bridge the gap between good intentions and practical implementation. "It's part-time initially," Olivia explained, "but if it works out, there's potential for it to become a full-time position with benefits and professional development opportunities." Harry studied the job description she'd provided. The salary was modest compared to what Olivia could probably afford to pay, but it was more than his security guard position had offered, and it came with the kind of meaningful purpose that had been missing from his work for years. "This isn't charity," he said, understanding finally clicking into place. "No," Olivia agreed. "This is partnership. You and Jamie both have skills and perspectives that the foundation needs. We have resources and opportunities that you need. It's a fair exchange that benefits everyone involved." As they finalized the details, Harry found himself studying Olivia with new appreciation. She had listened to his concerns, respected his values, and found a way to honor both his need for independence and her desire to help. This wasn't the behavior of someone offering charity from a position of superiority. This was the collaboration of equals working toward shared goals. "There's one more thing," Olivia said as they prepared to leave. "The legal situation with the investigation. Detective Chen mentioned you might need temporary relocation assistance." Harry nodded. "They're still looking for the third suspect, and they're concerned about retaliation. The foundation owns several furnished apartments that we use for visiting scholars and program participants. You and Jamie are welcome to stay in one until the situation is resolved. No cost, no obligation, just practical safety." For the first time since this entire situation began, accepting help from Olivia felt completely comfortable. Not because the circumstances had changed, but because the relationship had evolved into something based on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than gratitude and guilt. As Harry drove home to tell Jamie about their new adventure, he realized that sometimes the most important transformations weren't about money or opportunities. They were about learning to see yourself and others more clearly, and finding ways to build connections that honored everyone's dignity while creating possibilities that none of them could have achieved alone. 6 months later, Harry stood in front of a classroom at Westfield Elementary, watching 23rd graders work through mathematical problems that would have challenged high school students just a generation ago. The after-school enrichment program he'd developed for the Hartwell Foundation had become so successful that 3 other schools in the district had requested similar initiatives. "Mr. Walker," one of the students called out, "I solved the pattern problem, but I want to know why it works." Harry smiled, walking over to examine the girl's work. This was what he loved most about teaching, the moment when curiosity transcended simple problem solving and became genuine inquiry into how the world operated. "That's exactly the right question to ask," he told her. "Let's explore it together." As Harry guided the student through the underlying mathematical principles, he caught sight of Jamie through the classroom window. His son was in the courtyard with a group of middle schoolers, leading them through an environmental science project that connected mathematical modeling with marine ecosystem preservation. At 11 years old, Jamie had become one of the Foundation's most effective young ambassadors, able to explain complex concepts to peers while maintaining the enthusiasm that made learning infectious. The advanced mathematics program had exceeded everyone's expectations. Jamie was now working at a level typically reserved for high school students, but more importantly, he had developed the kind of analytical thinking skills that would serve him throughout his life. The Foundation work had taught him leadership, public speaking, and the satisfaction of helping others discover their own capabilities. After the students left that afternoon, Harry found Olivia waiting in the hallway, carrying a manila envelope, and wearing the kind of expression that suggested she had news that would be difficult to deliver. "We need to talk," she said simply. They walked to Harry's small office, which the Foundation had helped him set up when his part-time position had evolved into a full-time role as Director of Community Education Outreach. The space was modest, but comfortable, with bookshelves full of curriculum materials, children's artwork covering one wall, and a window that looked out over the playground where Jamie and his friends often conducted their research projects. "Harry," Olivia began, settling into the chair across from his desk, "I have something for you, but first I need to explain why." She opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. "Over the past 6 months, I've watched you transform not just our education program, but your own life. You've discovered what you were meant to do, and you're extraordinarily good at it." Harry nodded, feeling grateful for work that felt like purpose rather than just necessity. "It's been the best 6 months of my professional life, I know. Which is why this was such a difficult decision to make." Olivia slid the first document across the desk. "The Foundation has established a full scholarship for you to complete your bachelor's degree in education, followed by a master's degree if you choose. Full tuition, books, living expenses during your studies, and a guaranteed position when you graduate." Harry stared at the scholarship documentation, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. "Olivia, this is ... double quote. There's more." She placed a second document on the desk. "The Foundation is also establishing the Walker Family Educational Endowment, a fund that will provide scholarships for children from working families to access advanced educational opportunities. It's being seeded with enough money to support 50 students per year, indefinitely." Harry's hands trembled as he read the details. The endowment wasn't just substantial, it was transformational, the kind of fund that would change hundreds of lives over the coming decades. "But Harry," Olivia continued, her voice softer now, "the gift that I hope will truly leave you speechless isn't about money or programs or opportunities." She reached into the envelope one final time and pulled out a simple handwritten letter. 6 months ago, you risked everything to help a stranger. Not because you expected anything in return, but because it was right. That act of courage didn't just save me from a dangerous situation. It reminded me who I wanted to be, what I wanted my life to represent." Harry opened the letter, recognizing Jamie's careful handwriting immediately. "Dear Dad," it read, "Miss Olivia asked me to write down what I think makes you special, so here's my list. You help people even when it's hard. You never make me feel bad for being different or smart. You show me that being good matters more than being rich. You dream big but work for real things. You make me want to be like you when I grow up. I think Miss Olivia sees the same things I see. I hope you know how lucky I am to be your son. Love, Jamie." Harry read the letter twice, then looked up to find Olivia watching him with tears in her eyes. "Harry," she said softly, 6 months ago, I was surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Tonight, I'm sitting with someone who gave me something I didn't even know I needed, proof that good people still exist. And that kindness isn't naive or weak, but the strongest force in the world." Harry felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was offering, but more than that, he was moved by the recognition that their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had expected. Not just gratitude, not just professional collaboration, but genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. The endowment, he said finally, it's too much. It's exactly enough, Olivia replied. It's what happens when someone's courage creates ripples that extend far beyond a single moment of crisis. You helped me remember that wealth is only meaningful when it's used to create opportunities for others. This endowment will help hundreds of children for generations to come. That's the legacy of what you did in a parking garage on a Tuesday night. As Harry sat in his office, surrounded by evidence of the life he'd built through a combination of chance, courage, and the extraordinary generosity of someone who had become far more than just the stranger he'd helped, he understood that sometimes the most important transformations began with the simplest choice to do what was right, regardless of the cost. The scholarship would allow him to become the teacher he'd always dreamed of being. The endowment would ensure that other families like his could access opportunities that talent alone couldn't provide. But the letter from Jamie, that reminder that his son saw him as a hero not for what he accomplished, but for who he chose to be, that was the gift that truly left him speechless. Outside his window, Jamie was still in the courtyard, now teaching a younger student how to calculate water pollution levels using basic algebra. Harry watched his son with pride, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family strengthened by the knowledge that courage, compassion, and authentic relationships could transform ordinary lives into something extraordinary. And that sometimes, when you risk everything to help a stranger, you discover that the stranger was exactly who you needed to meet to become who you were meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.